executive producer, and host of your Break It Down show. I've got David. We're trying to work on some audio stuff, so I'm going to give him a second to come back into the studio. Sometimes you have to just give these things a moment. But I thought I would jump in and say hi to everybody. Hey, everybody, how y'all doing? The fun things that are coming up right now. I guess I should definitely tell you about Save the Brave. My buddy Brian Fuller from Power Rowing and also the Border Rowers. We are going to do a charity rowing challenge. Now, this is not going to be easy. When I say challenge, this is going to be hard. We are going to row 520 miles over the course of 50 days. That's what the row is going to be. 520 miles, 50 days. It's going to map the path that the Marines took in 1805, the first real Marine foreign soil conflict that they won. 1805, this was the Battle of the Barbary Pirates. They marched from Alexandria to Derna, which is in the state of Tripoli, and it basically across the bay from Tripoli. What that's going to do is, first off, it's hard. It's about 10 miles a day that you have to row. And so it's not for the lighthearted, but it is for people who want to take care of their heart. And also good for your charitable heart. So that's what we're going to do. It's $45 to sign up. Later on today, Brian from Power Rowing, my buddy, I've known this guy 30 years. We were in the Army together. He should have the link up so you can sign up. Even if you don't make it, it's fine. If you're like, oh man, I don't think I can do that all by myself, it's good. It's okay. We have teams. And you can sign up with somebody else and they'll do it with you. All right, let me see if I can get David's audio to come up. David, can you hear me and can I hear you? Oh, since I can hear
you. I can hear you. And then just as I went out of the studio and came back in, I realized I was on mute. Sorry.
These are the things, right? This is what we do. Anyhow, I want to finish up talking about the road to Derna. And then you and I will start formally. So this road to Derna is going to be really cool, you guys. It's going to take about 50 days. It's going to start on September 10th and end just before Halloween on October 30th. If you're into it, great. Look, if you're not into it and you're like, I just want to support Pete, we'll get you a link for that as well. But look for that link later on today. I'll put it in social and Facebook and that kind of thing. But the road to Derna. And it's not 51 days. It's not 65 days. You got to sign up on time. You got to start on time. That's your orders. And you got to make your SP and you got to start rowing. Again, you don't have to make it. Sign up and see how you do. And then next year, maybe we'll do something similar or something harder or something easier. It's going to be pretty rigorous, though. My rowing friends are like, that's easy, Pete. Make something harder. But for entry-level folks or folks who are like, hey, I think I row a little bit in the gym, you can handle this. It's going to take you some time and some dedication. Today, joining us is my buddy David. David, I'm going to point at the camera. You're going to say this is David King, and you're watching the Break It Down show. Got to say that. This is David King, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
My name is David King, and you're watching the Break It Down show, one of the best shows on the internet.
That's right. We are one of the best shows on the internet. So there is a pile of stuff that I don't know about you, and it's way bigger than the pile of stuff I know about you. So do us all a favor, and I guess describe who you are and what you do.
Oh Lordy, I grew up in Waco, Texas, and I got kicked out of university after 1 year with a grade point average of 0.89. And they told me to find a new hobby. So I did. And I went to work for a television station out on Interstate 35 in between Waco and Temple. It was an NBC affiliate. And I started off sweeping the floor in the studio. And within a year, I was directing 6 and 10 News. And that sort of kicked off a really interesting trip that has lasted for many years. And I've worked in television, I've worked in film, I've worked in advertising. I've done all these things, and I got out of the corporate world in 2012 and ended up working for the International Fencing Federation and helped set up their digital streaming operations. And I became the Dickinson, and now we have about 2 million viewers, and it's a small sport, but it's an interesting one, and somewhere in between all of that were a lot of other interesting adventures. But that's about without going on for about a half an hour. That's the capsule version.
How did you go from getting kicked out of school to sweeping floors to running things that fast?
Um, I I found that I really loved it. Aside from the fact that that we had all of the original versions of Star Trek on 16 millimeter film in the can, and that I could load them up and watch them whenever I wanted to. This is pre VHS days, and it was fun. I really loved it, and I still do to this day. I mean, it is. I do probably 8, 10, 12 live broadcast events every season. I just finished up this season in Cairo, and there's just an energy to it, and a just sort of free flowing energy. And you do a live broadcast, and so I think you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, there's just this great energy in doing that, and talking to people and telling people about what's going on, and all of that. And there's a reason why I now have the job that I do, and that's because I never stop talking.
Okay, so I guess a big question we all got to ask is how does a guy who was raised in Texas end up with what appears to be some kind of a European accent? How do you end up that? And are you an American or are you British or what's your background?
Um, I'm an American. When I was born, my dad was in the U.S. Army, on his way to Korea, and so I was actually born in um, a place called Camp Chaffee that I think is now called Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. But my family was from my mother's side of the family from Fort Worth, my father's side of the family from Waco, and I grew up in Waco. And as I developed my career, which I really didn't even know was going to be a career, working in television, I spent 12 years in New York, working on one of the most amazing television programs for 13 years. Uh, it was maybe something you remember. And it was great fun. I was a writer and producer, field producer, and director for a show called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, which
Wow.
I'm not sure it could even be made these days. But um, and then I accidentally stumbled into um, a friend of mine, colleague, was given a computer, and it was a Texas Instruments computer, and I wanted to know, how do you make this thing work? Because I couldn't make it work. And then I think this was in about 1986. I got a Macintosh, and I could make that work. But I decided I wanted to know more about what was going on. What is this thing? What are these machines, and what are they about? And so I decided to learn to code, and I enjoyed it, but I realized that if I kept at it, that was all I was ever going to be able to do. and that wasn't the life that I wanted. I wanted to be more creative with things, and I very accidentally ended up working for an advertising agency and starting their internet division
Yeah.
in probably about 1992. And then that led to a whole different career for a lot of major advertising agencies where I was
Let's back
involved
up
in
and let's talk
the
about
development.
lifestyles because that's interesting. The you're right. Well, we probably have versions of that, modern versions of that show quite frequently. I mean, there was that MTV version of it, where they would tour through the person's house and their cars and that kind of thing. But that's a very modern show concept to go into some rich person's world and kind of tell us. We see that in social media with influencing. You just don't need, Robin to walk around with his fancy ways and show us all these fancy things. But tell us more about that. I mean, what was that like on the inside? And then, if anybody hasn't seen Lifestyles of Rich and Famous, just type it
The,
into Bing. You'll see it.
the number of people that I can't even begin to count the number of people, but I can say that I have interviewed Mickey Mantle. You know, I have been kicked out of what was her name? Uh, was it one of the Gabor sisters? I've been kicked out of her house.
Shaja,
Uh,
Ava, the other one.
yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember which one it was, but I mean the number of really interesting people that I've met, that I have spent time with. It was a blast. It was an absolute blast, and the number of people, which I can count on one hand, who had broken down Rolls Royces parked in their driveway that didn't actually work. Um, but they wanted everybody to see that they had a Rolls Royce in their driveway. It was a crazy time, and it was a time when we were coming out of the pain of the 70s, and then all of a sudden everybody was like, what, I'd like to have some money, and I'd like to have a job, and I would like to, and everybody it was a different time, and you know I don't know. Maybe we go back to a time like that at some point, but it was really amazing. And Robin Leach was a really great guy to work with, and he I grew up in Waco, Texas. He grew up in Waco, Britain, and he made a huge success out of the program, and he made a huge success out of his life, and R.I.P. Robin, but he was a great guy to work for, really.
It seems like it, and it seems like you guys had a great time. I'm
But we
curious.
also, I mean, there was a lot of flash. There
Say
was
it
a,
again.
there was a lot of flash about the program, but we tried to do serious things as well. One of the best interviews I think I've ever done was with Lady Bird Johnson, the wife of President Lyndon Johnson, who set up a whole thing about wildflowers, and um, and so there was a serious side to it, and I don't mean serious and talking about serious issues, but I mean it wasn't just flash. It was real people doing real things.
Yeah. I'm curious when you think about the interviews that you've had. People always often ask me like, "What's your favorite interview?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, there are too many of them." Right? It's the next one. It's the one I'm doing right now. But who does stand out for you? Like who over the years kind of holds a place in your heart where you're like, "That was a magical moment."
Um, I think that one thing that stood out for me, all of them did, but
Yeah.
um, it's interviewing John Conley. Do you remember John Conley? He
Sure.
was in the car with Kennedy when he was shot, and John Conley was hit as well. But that was this is a guy who was he governor of Texas or lieutenant
Yeah. He
governor
was
of
governor.
Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah, and And then I think he became Secretary of the Treasury, maybe in the Reagan administration. But he was just a really interesting guy, and he had a lot of really important things to say. But to talk to somebody and ask them about being in the car when John Kennedy was killed and being shot by the same bullet,
Yeah.
it's very moving, very moving.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I also have to say that talking to Mickey Mantle about his view of his baseball career was, yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. And Lady Bird, I mean, she lived a long time after her husband, and
Yeah.
had her own personal detail from the Secret Service, and yeah, I mean, lived a long, long life. When you look back at that time, is that the highlight of your career, or was there something later on?
Well, that was a highlight.
Right.
Before I started working on lifestyles, um, having come out of university, I went back to university, and when I got back there after 2 years, I had gotten some positive sort of grade point average, developed in that time. But and the experience that I had from working in television at a television station, when I got back to university, they had set up a film and TV department. So they hired me. So I was going back to school, and and I was told that I would never be on anything but academic probation because it was a big hill to climb. But I worked for the university, and we had an OB van, and so I got to work on live broadcasts for San Antonio Spurs, and wrestling, like like you know I can't remember the name of the family, but they were like the sort of founding cult
Yeah.
of the
The
of,
Von
of
Erichs,
wrestling. That,
those guys.
yeah, the Von Erichs,
Look
yeah.
at people pulling one out.
And 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 we got to do so many interesting broadcast things with, what was, uh, the name will come to me, but um, uh, we did the live broadcast of um, a speech by Ronald Reagan,
Mm.
and I was running camera on that, and it was at the university. And I'm like, I wasn't that interested in politics and any of that really, but this guy came out and started talking, and I'm standing behind the camera and listening to the director telling me to, zoom in or zoom out or whatever. And I looked over, and I'm like, who is this guy? Who is this person? And it was a really amazing moment. But after doing all of those type of things, which were just jobs for broadcast purposes, and we were really lucky to have that OB van. It opened the door for so many people that I was in school with, that I worked with.
Yeah.
Um, but because of that, we got asked to do we got asked to film the final um, performances of Rod Stewart and the Faces, um, before Ron Wood left the band, and and then that opened that just kicked a big door open, and that was I found my place,
Yeah.
and I'm going to plead the Fifth Amendment on anything that might have happened, um, in, like before going on stage and before we started shooting. But those were some interesting times.
Yeah,
And
I bet.
because of that, then when Ron Wood left Faces, he went to the Rolling Stones.
Right.
And so then I was asked to come and film all the rehearsals of the Stones, to sort of bring Ron Wood into the fold. And so we were filming in the loft, in the attic of a restaurant that was a big restaurant that was kind of like a TGI Fridays kind of Victorian kitsch kind of thing. And we would start the rehearsals at 11 p.m. and then we would have breakfast at 7 a.m. So we were up all night, and it was just some of the most amazing music. And I actually set up a track in a circle around the band and had the band all facing in to each other. And we had two singers from the Meters, which was a New Orleans band. Um, and it was a phenomenal thing. But I had the camera on a track, and it would just go around and around and around as they played. And uh, and then that led to, oh, whose tour was it? Some disco guy named Gino Vanelli that I'm sure no one remembers, but he had big hair. Um, and then that, because all of this was being done for Warner Records, that landed me on the Sex Pistols American tour. I shot all the video on the Sex Pistols American tour, and I still have my tour badge.
That's crazy. That's crazy. All right, so let's take a pause here and let's dive into this part of it because I asked you originally about the highlights of your career, knowing that you have like many highlights. And I think as guys like us, we're sojourners. Like we're looking for something else. We're looking for, oh, that's incredible. I'll do that experience, and then because of that and some drive and some intelligence, you get a new opportunity to do something else. And the next thing you know, you're working with Ronnie Wood and the Rolling Stones and the Sex Pistols. Do you know what the Sex
And
Pistols are in that
and
moment?
sitting on a and,
Go
and,
ahead.
and sitting on a double shoe shine chair that is like raised up with Keith Richards, and then he pulls out the iced teaspoon. But anyway, carry on.
Well, and then so when you're working with the Sex Pistols, do you know what they are and then what they're going to become when you're doing it, or is this a job for a band? That's sort of notable because the Sex Pistols, I mean, they're the classic supernova. One real album, and then a whole lot of chaos, and then that's it. They were more of a thing than they were a band.
Yes, but they were a really good band, and they had to work really hard to sound as bad as they did, and they actually didn't sound bad at all. But the thing is that the sort of music scene that I was in was actually quite corporate, and Warner Records calls and says, um, we need you to go to Atlanta to start a 10 stop tour across the U.S. This was like in January of 1978, and 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 they said we're gonna put a copy of their album. It's a band you've never heard of called the Sex Pistols, and I'm like, the what? And they were going to put a copy of the album, a vinyl album, in the mail, and I got it about 4 or 5 days later, and I put it on the turntable, and I went, what the f is this? So I turn up to meet the tour, and I'm wearing jeans and a button-down white Oxford shirt and a jacket and cowboy boots, of course. And this guy comes out and he's got on leather trousers and a leather trench coat with a swastika armband on it and hair like a toilet brush. And I just looked at him and I said, "Well, it must be Halloween somewhere." And he laughed and we actually got on really well. But that was an amazing experience. And you're right. I mean, they weren't created as a band. They were created as a band to promote a clothing shop in King's Road in London, and they were sort of this anti-corporate thing that Vivian Westwood and Malcolm McLaren sort of dreamed up. But they were a force. They were a force of nature, and 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 I then went on after the tour ended in San Francisco, where the band very intentionally broke up and walked into the the after performance drinks at the at the venue in San Francisco, which was Bill Graham's place. I can't remember what it was called, but and they all the people from Warner Records were in there, and they walked in and said, "F you, we're off," and they left. But I went straight from there to London to work on a documentary about punk rock for the publisher of High Times magazine. So, you know, what was this life that I was leading? I had absolutely no idea, but it was great fun.
It is great fun. It's crazy the Sex Pistols thing, man. Because again, we look now at they're like this cultural icon, and but during their time, their message was a very powerful one, just the rejection of all things. So much so that Johnny Lydon, when they get inducted into the Hall of Fame, he calls the thing a piss stain, which is, you know, exactly what they're supposed to say, right? And they don't show up, and whatever, he scribbles something. But what were these dudes like personal day to day? I mean, are they living this life, or is this more of an act than maybe we realized? Would you say?
Well, there were the drummer and the guitar player, Mick Mick Jones, and I
Yeah,
can't remember
yeah.
the
Paul
drummer and the
Cook,
guitar player.
um,
Yeah, Paul Cook, and but
Steve Jones,
they were
Steve Jones.
Steve Jones and Paul Cook. Yeah, they were session musicians. Okay, they were actually um, session musicians.
Hmm.
And then the guy who wrote all the music, um, his mother made him quit the band after. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm old and my memory is fading, but the guy that wrote all the music, and it was really good music, his mother made him quit the band, and that's when John Lydon came in as singer, and then they hired Sid Vicious as bass player. And one of the reasons was because he was such a mess and didn't actually know how to play bass, but that he was he was the poster boy for um, for the mess that the band was trying to be. But they were the music stands up. The music stands up. Um, it's God Save the Queen. I mean, that's anthemic, but Holiday in the Sun, and and the thing is about you look at the Sex Pistols and you listen to what they're saying, and they were actually a very conservative bunch.
Huh.
The messages were extraordinarily extraordinarily conservative for the time, and and yes, they were anti-corporate, um, yes, they were, um, you know, they, the Sex Pistols are something that could happen again now.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as they don't pre-can the outcome, right? Like as long as they let it be what it needs to be, because there definitely was some good marketing behind them. But you need them to be as dangerous as they were and willing to be dangerous to themselves, like Sid Vicious was.
Well, you can find it on YouTube. Um, if you if you search for DOA, a rite of passage, and Sid Vicious, Nancy Spungen interview, I was sat at the end of the bed. We were in their flat after he had come back from. He was taken off a plane in New York, coming back from San Francisco, and he had developed pneumonia, and had had a little bit too much, sedatives
Yeah.
in him. And then when they came back, we were
If you want
already
to eat
working on the.
healthy and feel your best,
Trying to get that video to pull up so I can put the link out. Go ahead, continue.
But you can find this interview with them on YouTube, and it is amazing how messed up the two of them were, Sid and Nancy, and they passed out in each other's arms on the bed during the interview. And as we were getting up to go, I had my camera with me, and I took a shot of them in a really sort of amazing embrace. And then about 3 weeks later, when he murdered her in the Chelsea Hotel in New York, that ended up being published in Rolling Stone magazine. That's that photograph of them. And but yeah, if you look that up, you will see how crazy it actually was.
All right, let's close the chapter on the Sex Pistols. This does create access to you for other musical ventures. What are some of the other things that you just look and you're okay? First off, let me ask you this: do you still get starstruck? And then, and if you ever did, what kind of acts was it like when you see someone walk in and you're like, I have to really focus on what I'm doing? Because people in our line of work, you interviewing Mickey Mantle, it's easy to get lost in the fact that here's Mickey Mantle, but Mickey Mantle's just sitting there. He's just working. He's just being himself.
Um, I don't do starstruck. I think the last time I was starstruck, I was about 6 years old, and I met Roy Rogers.
Mm,
Are you
that's
even old enough to remember Roy Rogers?
I am. Well, look, I live down the street from the Angels Stadium, and so all those old cowboy guys, Ray Rogers, if I'm not mistaken, he owned the Angels for a while. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember these guys, and yeah. So and when you're young and you have these stars and you see them, you're like, oh my gosh, Captain Kangaroo, whoever it's going to be. You see them, and there's something deep inside of you that you can't control. That definitely changes how you talk to that person, right?
But it does. But you when you sort of lift the lid, when you're spending a week working with the Rolling Stones, when you spend a couple of weeks working with Rod Stewart and the Faces, when you are around these people, not on the outside, and um, this is what I was recently trying to explain to my daughter, and because she comes with me 2 times a year to work at the junior and senior world championships for fencing, and 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 so um, she was complaining to me about a year ago about, well, I'm having to do all this work, and I just want to watch fencing, and I want to, have fun and all that other stuff. And I said, well, here's the lesson you need to learn. You need to learn the difference between going to the circus and working for the circus.
Mm.
And you work for the circus now. And when you're in the circus, when the lid is lifted and you're in it, it's a completely different experience than um, than do you know what I'm saying? That you know, I mean, how are you gonna and working for Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, the same thing. You're with these people, you're around them, and so that's different than like seeing somebody famous that walk into a restaurant and go, oh look, it's him. No, what
Yeah.
you say is, oh hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
And so it's a different perspective, but I think it's a healthy perspective, really,
Yeah. A buddy of
because
mine is Jay Moore.
like, like like you said about the Sex Pistols, they
Hmm.
were manufactured.
Yeah. Yeah. I so a buddy of mine is Jay Moore, and one of my favorite things to do with him is just to come hang out with my buddy Jay. I don't ask him for anything. And look, he's successful. He travels the nation being a comedian. He's acted in movies that we've all seen, but I don't want him to have to be that guy. I want him to just be my friend, and we both appreciate it. We both acknowledge that like this is something that it's it's easy to pull off if you have no need from Jay other than just to be his buddy and me to be his buddy. But if you have other motives at all, it kind of pollutes that experience and allows Jay to be this great guy. Doesn't have to perform. And look, he's naturally going to be funny because we'll crack ourselves up. But there is something to that, and there's also just taking that and extending it to the next thing. So Joe DiMaggio walks in, and you're familiar. It's like, oh hey Joe, is there anything I can do for you tonight? Special for your restaurant thing or whatever it is, right? Like you don't like go crazy. It's like, hey, have a seat. You're at the restaurant. Great. I'll bring you some water. What else do you need? And you just treat them like a regular dude. One of my favorite questions to ask people who are just hyper successful and famous is when no one's looking and they're just doing the things they have to do, what's something that you're like, if the world could see me now, if the world could see David King now, this guy who's met all these incredible people, and one of them was Brandy Roderick. She said, "Oh yeah, I clean my own toilets at my Airbnbs." Here's this Playmate of the Year, iconic, beautiful lady, and she's on her hands and knees scrubbing a toilet because someone has to do it. It's her business, so she does it herself. Or like someone like this person, this famous lady's who like just does laundry all the time. She's like, I do about 6 loads of laundry a day. That's the most normal thing in the world. And when you realize that and you allow that person to just be a person, I think you get further than with the I don't know, being agog and smitten by their fame.
Most people have to clean their toilets.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
most people have to do their own laundry, and and I would rather do my own laundry than have somebody else do it.
yeah,
I mean, these are um, I work around um, and I am friends with Olympic champions. I work around and I am friends with world champions. I and these, but I'll go back to it again. We all work for the circus, you know, and so um, it is. Um, are they great people? Are they inspiring? Yes, they are. And it's my job to talk to them. It's my
right,
job to talk about them.
yeah,
It is my job to say, how bad was your knee injury? But I see them. I see them sweaty, in their gym kit, and and I see them doing the work that it takes to become successful, and that's the thing. I have a friend who will remain anonymous, who is who's in a band, a really big one. Okay, um, but when I go over to his place, um, you know, we're just sitting around drinking beer and cooking dinner.
Yeah.
And you know, and his kids come over and we talk and we don't talk about music very much. We talk about fencing because that's how I know him.
Right.
And sometimes we work together on TV. And but 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 at the heart of it, if you are not if you the whole cult of celebrity is one of the just is completely ridiculous for you know for genuine people and I really don't have time for a lot of
Yeah.
you know celebrity you know stuff you know
Yeah.
you still got to clean your toilet you still got to do your laundry.
You have a job too, and it's not just talking to these folks. There's a job within that job too. Like when I'm talking to whoever it is. Andy Summers is great, right? He's not the best interview in the world. It's a little bit hard to deal with. But one of the things that we did when John and I went to his house was we had to get through a lot of barriers that they had put up just to make it hard to get there. Physical and mental and everything else. But we didn't start off with or really focus on the police at all because he's talked about that for decades. And, he's an artist. He wants to talk about what he's doing now. And that enabled us to get Andy to a different place. And that's what I owe Andy. That's what John, when I were sitting there, is to be great guests in their house, but to let them be the best version of them that they can be. And I promise asking some other question about the police, it's just not going to be it. That's not a great path to get there. So you have the same thing where you've got to find that thing and do them the favor of being better than the standard, magazine level interview or the 7-minute TV interview. You've got to do something better than that.
Well, the, yeah, I think it depends on the you know on the format you know what you do
Yeah.
on this program. um, I think is excellent because you know if you're working on a program like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous,
Right.
then you know you got to show the Rolls Royce even if it doesn't work,
Right.
and but you can't say that it doesn't work,
Right.
and you have to meet sort of expectations of the format, but your
For sure.
format is is open and it's honest, and and that's why um, that's why it's so fun to do
Yeah.
because you're not trying to make me promote something. I don't have anything to promote, so you know, but it is a real discussion.
Right. Right. There's a lot of lessons that you learn along the way doing the stuff that we do. A lot of it's dealing with celebrity and everything, but there's also um, lessons of like how to actually get this done, when to say stop, cancel, when to push through. These are not easy lessons to gather, and they're often painful because we're doing something that's everybody's time is so valuable, and you have to be able to manage when things don't go right or when an opportunity presents itself. You've got to have that flexibility to say I need to take that picture of Sid and Nancy passed out, right? Like that moment, right? You have to learn these lessons. What are some of these lessons that you've picked up along the way where you recognize something and it changes how you approach your work?
Well, the when I started my career in television, and I didn't know it was going to be my career. When I started on live with live broadcast. Okay, and you have to be you learn really quickly that like if you know a set piece falls over, what do when you're live on the air? You have to be able to respond really quickly, but not in a panicked way.
Right.
I'll tell you one thing that happened to me at KCEN TV in Waco, Texas, or in between Waco and Temple. Um, I was working the Sunday shift, which was basically a skeleton crew. I was directing the news. I had a projectionist, had a sound engineer who was actually the actual engineer. And there was the weather guy who was going to do the 6 and 10 news. Okay, there was only, and one person was on camera. So there was like five of us, six of us, and a winter storm blew in. This was like in January, and it was an ice storm. And we had all brought our dinner, for um, because we were all going to go home at midnight when we shut down the station. And then the Monday crew would come in. We were iced in. It wasn't snow, it was sheet ice on Interstate 35, and everywhere, and nobody could get anywhere. And we were snowed into that station for 5 days. And there was one guy who lived within walking distance who was able to bring us food. But we had to keep the station on the air and running from 6 a.m. to midnight
Yes.
every day, 5 days, with six people.
Yeah.
And uh, and that is something that shapes your view of the world, because there was no option. There was no option to say, well, we need to take a nap now, or I'm hungry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy, right? And everybody's able to watch because everybody's locked in their house, and so you are a lifeline to whatever it is. And there are not enough of you.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Well,
it.
when you've been in the military, you know,
Yeah.
when circumstances present themselves, you deal with it. You deal
Yeah.
with it,
You
and
know,
and
go ahead. I was going to say that these things do happen. My buddy Scott and I, we did our first fundraiser where we drove across the country and back. And it's hard with two dudes trying to safely get across the country, raise a bunch of money, have events every night. And so it was a lot of work. And so we were finally able to go to sleep. It was late, like midnight. We were finally just unwinding, trying to fall asleep. And then Scott realized he'd left the gas card about 60 miles up the road at the last gas station, or maybe I did. I don't know. It was a combination of our work together that the gas card ended up staying there, right? And so it's not about blame because really either one of us should have checked the other one and got it done. So it's like, all right, well, we'll get in the truck, we'll race back that way, we'll race back this way as fast as we can, and we'll get that card, and we'll move on. It was the last thing we wanted to do after midnight, but we did it, and we did it really fast because I just drove really fast. But it's those kind of things, right? Where you're like, well, there's nothing we can do except for just go do this thing. We don't want to do it, but here we are having to do it. So let's get it done.
exactly.
Yeah,
You don't. There's not an option. There are no options. You do it. You just do it.
yeah, yeah. You've done some pretty amazing things, obviously, right? What stands out for you is like, oh man, this one opportunity. I can't believe I got a chance to do that. I mean, like the Rolling Stones, Sex Pistols, your friend who we haven't discussed in detail. There's all these things that happen, but what really, like, I can't believe I got to do this.
And pretty much everything. Pretty much everything. I've spent my life going, wow, and um, and and one of the things is that, and I got some good advice early on in life, um, and and you have to be open. You have to be open to whatever it is that comes next. It was I think that I was probably about 22, and coming to the end of, and I had done, I think I'd done the Rod Stewart and the Stones thing, and I kind of got a bit of a big head, and and I was complaining to somebody that I, um, I deserved more big things, and when are these other big things going to happen? And a guy just looked at me and he said, "You know what? Nothing big is going to happen to you till you're 40. So what you need to spend your time doing is learning everything you can about everything you can and being open, because nothing's going to happen. Nothing big is going to happen to you until you're 40."
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And and so I actually took that to heart. And you know what? He was right.
Yeah.
The big stuff didn't start happening until I was 40. And but in the meantime, I never said no to an opportunity to learn something and to it's like, how does this computer work? How do you actually turn it on and make it do something? Okay. I wanted to know, so I learned C plus. Was it C plus or C plus plus? And then realized that that was not what I was meant to do, but that it gave me the understanding of how the technology works. So then I could do some other things with it. I did the I created, along with the team that I created, the first $1 million website, which was Pepsi World in
Mm.
1986. Is it 96? 86? No, 96, I think. Um, and and it was a website that almost nobody, unless you had high-speed broadband, could actually like use, because we had all the things that we now take for granted, but in 1996. But if you walk down the streets of New York in 1996, there were big bus posters, big big posters on and and billboards and everything talking about Pepsi World. You know, so if I hadn't have done that one thing, I wouldn't have ended up doing Pepsi World. I wouldn't have ended up doing the first real World Cup
Yeah.
website for Paris '98. And 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 so you just have to be open. What and you never know what it is you're going to be open to, but you have to be curious. You have to
No,
want
you're
to
right.
know about the world.
Yeah. It's an incredible life, guys like us get to lead because of that comfort to with opportunity and the ability to withstand some miscomfort. To go to places like, oh, I got to go 8 weeks in a row. I got to be in the road. I was looking down the gauntlet of that myself coming into July. We were had a camping trip. I'd be back for a couple of days. I had this project I had to get to, and then I had to get on and I'm just now getting back and getting caught up on emails and stuff. But what an incredible experience. I got to go see our friend Josh in Texas and go out and see the nation face to face and interact with people. One of the things that I kind of fed into my brain as I was going to go on this long journey, from California to South Carolina and back, was that box on the wall with the news and everything else. It is full of lies. And if you go out and you interact with people where they're at and how they're at, you will find a totally different reality that is actually based in reality, because this person is standing in front of you and telling you face to face what their problems are, what makes them upset, what makes them happy. And it has very little to do with what's on the TV. And I guess what I'm asking you as a fellow sojourner and person who recognizes opportunity, when you interact with people, instead of going across the lower part of the states, you go from Europe to Asia and Africa, in an 8 week period. Is the same thing true for you? Do you see a different reality when you're out there interacting with people?
Okay, First, Pete,
Yeah.
I work in TV.
Yes.
Okay, I work in TV. I'm on TV. I don't own a television. I don't watch television. If I want to watch
Yeah.
something, if I want to watch something that I've done, I just go on YouTube and do, a VOD to just check my work. Okay, I don't watch television. I listen to the radio. Mainly what I listen to is classical music. And I don't pay any attention. If you know a lot about any particular subject, and I try and know as much as I can about everything because it impacts what I do. But
Right.
then you listen to a television program, you listen to a radio program, and then you go, well, that's just wrong. That is absolutely, completely incorrect. So what's the point in listening to people BSing, about stuff? You learn it, you learn from it, you do it. But um, it's my job to talk to people. It's my job to know about them. It's
Yeah.
my job to listen to people, and and you know, yeah, for the most part, it's in a specific you know Olympic sport, but that's how you learn is listening.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Hey, I've been pounding on you for about an hour here. Do you want to ask me any questions?
Oh, how did it feel to win the silver medal in Cairo? Um,
Did you win? Did you compete and win a medal?
Sorry?
Did you win a medal in Cairo?
No, 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 no. That was the first question that came into my head.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
the uh, because the questions that I normally ask are around that type of thing. But I I um, I know what it takes to do what you do, and
Yeah.
and and you know what is it that that keeps you getting up every day and doing this program?
There's a couple of things. One, I love doing it, and so though it's hard, and I've kind of picked my spots of what I'm going to work hard on. I'm not going to develop a TikTok channel. I'm not going to develop an Instagram presence. I'm not going to do those things because it doesn't fulfill the greater show thing, right? And maybe that cost me some on marketing, but there's only one and me and a couple of Macedonians, and between the three of us, it's just not that much capacity, right? So, what makes it great for me is that I love doing what I'm doing, and then the fuel are the interactions, the people that I get to meet. I get to know you, I get to know Josh, I get to know all these different people because of the life that I lead in the show that I have, and it's just I often say, like, how am I doing? Well, I'm tired, I'm broke, but I'm fulfilled. Like, I don't make a lot of money doing this. There's some money coming in, and it's always slightly getting slightly smaller, but there's not like been a big financial break that would really make this thing a magical thing, right? So why do I do it? It's because I'm damn good at it. I love it, and it provides opportunities in so many other ways that I would never want to deny me and the other people that I meet the opportunity to have these experiences.
Well, one of the keys to fulfillment and happiness is being curious,
Yeah,
and you are. So,
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, listen, that's an hour. Let's do another one soon. I can't wait to talk to you more about. I mean, there's you and I both know there's so much more to this iceberg that is David King. So, if everybody check out the show, look, put a couple of comments in there and ask some questions. We'll get to those with David next time. Anything in closing before we wrap this up, David?
um, I, I'm no, no, because I have my usual clothes. So, and I'm not sure anybody's interested in hearing. This has been the live presentation of the 2022 Cairo World Championships. Thank you and good night.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.